Dr. Franklin is larger than life to me, and I am very grateful to have him with me on this conversation today. I want to talk today, Dr. Franklin, and welcome you to this first installment. But today, as we honor the legacy and life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who died some 52 years ago today in Memphis, Tennessee, our dear departed ancestor. He died believing in the beloved community as the sort of a community that eliminated the triple evils of poverty, militarism, and racism. And so where we are today as it relates to the coronavirus, which is expounding on these triple evils that still are, how do we navigate through these tumultuous times together, looking back on this legacy?
Well, thank you, Reverend Green. I'm very proud of the work you have done, that you did at Morehouse as a young student, and that you've done since then. You've really distinguished the college and your family and yourself. This is a critical question as we converse today on the eve, as it were, of Dr. King's last day on the planet 52 years ago. We recall that on this day, April 3rd, 1968, he would have been preparing. He had a busy, full day of meetings and time with his staff, and trying to think some about the Poor People's March that was to occur, and a lot going on when that tragic day unfolded. Of course, that evening he preached, in many regards, one of the most memorable messages ever. I've been to the mountaintop at Charles Harrison Mason Temple in Memphis. And so this is an extraordinary day, and I always feel kind of haunted on this day, and of course on the April 4 anniversary, and will never forget my time as a student preparing to go to Morehouse myself as that was unfolding in '68. But back to your question, I think with coronavirus and the impact it's having on our national community, the thing that King was so committed to was building community, beloved community that was inclusive, that did not build walls, but rather bridges, so that the African American struggle would be linked with other domestic struggles, the struggle of women, the struggle of Latinx community, the struggle of Native American peoples, the struggle of labor, of women, of LGBTQ communities. Dr. King always had this expansive view of building a community of solidarity and support that would then work for justice. And so as we've moved through this virus season and really still preparing, getting out the umbrellas, as it were, because the storm is about to turn up a notch, we need to stand together. And I think part of that, and I heard that implied in your way you framed this question, is what, and to cite another book title by Dr. King, in fact, published in 1968, as you know, and that wonderful book title in question, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Where do we go from here, chaos or community? So as we envision post-COVID-19, what kind of communities, what kind of congregations, what kind of nation, what kind of world, global community we have to think about the inclusivity of our community building and the fundamental interdependence, the interconnection of all people in that future community.
Can you talk about your relationship with Dr. Mays and Dr. Mays' relationship with Dr. King as this concept and framing of shifting moral conscience to shift public policy emerges and is actualized from Dr. King's legacy and even to the work you're doing today?
Well, obviously, you and I both feel a special connection to Dr. King, as all three of us graduates, Morehouse men. But I also have a special personal connection to Dr. Mays because I attended the University of Chicago. It's actually something you also share, in part because of Mays's academic journey there. And then the vision he brought back to Morehouse as president in shaping the culture of the college so that it fostered the production of these dynamic young leaders that Dr. King and people like Otis Moss, Maynard Jackson, Julian Bond, and Amos Brown, and a vast number of other leaders merged on that campus, as I did, as you did. And so Mays was a producer, a shaper of a community, and he was curating extraordinary talent, the conscience of the nation. And he understood that to be part of the mission of that very unique liberal arts college. Not all colleges were doing that. They were providing educational resources and experiences for students to go out and do whatever they would choose to do. Mays said, no, when we are members of an oppressed, marginalized people, we have a special obligation, in some ways hearkening back to the vision of Du Bois and of Henry Morehouse and other leaders who talked about the obligations of the better educated members of the community and talented tenant. So Mays and King bonded in special ways, of course, because Dr. King's father, we call him affectionately Daddy King, was also a Morehouse man and a friend of President Benjamin Elijah Mays. Frequent conversations, both colleagues in the National Baptist Convention, both working for racial justice and recognizing the importance of religion. You think about that word religion, the Latin root of lig, L-I-T, in the middle of the word religion, is the same word as ligament. You think about the thick, flexible tissue that holds our bones and muscle structures together. And this notion that religion should be that religio, that connecting fabric across the human family. So Mays, studying in a place like Chicago with a deep appreciation for religious pluralism, he instills that in the DNA of the culture of Morehouse. So King is reared, yes, appreciating African-American public intellectuals and thinkers. His boys was on campus, E. Franklin Frazier and others, but he's also paying attention to what's going on in the Indian struggle across the waters. What role is Hinduism playing there? And he discovers Gandhi, is introduced to Gandhi and his writings, or even early struggles in this country, Thoreau and others deeply imprinted him. So that's that connection between a president of a college who has a certain vision of what it should do, one of the most distinguished students in that student body who emerges, who really fully embraces what his president was doing, and then what he went on to do in the world that impacts all of our lives. And I have to say, there were times at Morehouse when I, regarded you as one of those people, as a college president, looking at those students who would mature and go out to have an impact in the world, that it reminds me so much of what Dr. Mays, Dr. King, and others were up to.
That's humbling. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to this generation, because while you were president, we were active. I mean, we were mobilizing. It was the emergence of the movement for Black Lives.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to wrestle with that legacy of resistance while also helping to shape the world that could be. And I wonder now, 52 years later, where the movement leads us next as it relates to this being a pivotal election this being on the heels of this crisis that's affecting the global community and the global family, is that where does the movement pivot next and
Yes.
to continue to take the torch
Mm.
for this generation?
Well, just think about what's unfolded during the emergence of the Trump administration. I think there's been significant mobilization. And I want to credit the women's movement. The very weekend of Mr. Trump's inauguration, 1 million women in the nation's capital mobilized, saying, "We will not allow one who has so profoundly disrespected women to get away with it, or to forget that we are here, we are paying attention." And the spirit, as you were saying, that even preceded and helped to expand that women's demonstration in public were those movements in the street of young African Americans who were saying no to police brutality and misbehavior, to the young students in Parkland, Florida, who were saying no to these obsessive focuses on the Second Amendment, to the exclusion of the rest of the Constitution even. And so I think all these movements are flourishing. They are present. I think they're ready to be reset and relaunched in a powerful way. And who could have predicted that this global pandemic might have that kind of impact, not just in America, for helping to brush away unproductive, visionless leaders, non-productive leaders, divisive leaders, but that it might happen not just in America, but throughout the world. And so I have to say that that is my secret hope and prayer, and that toward which I'll be working, is let this be a new day as we write a new chapter for this nation and for the world. Let health and healthiness and interconnection and respect be born out of what proved to be a very destructive moment by this disease.
Yeah. I've always loved and been enamored by your preaching ministry as well.
Mm.
You had to preach on Sunday morning.
Mm.
What would your sermon title and maybe text be?
Well, I think I was just reading this extraordinary passage in Matthew's Gospel from the 28th chapter. We always quote the end of that chapter, the Great Commission, go ye into all the world. But I was struck early on in recounting the Easter story. I had missed over the years this wonderful little phrase that when the women first showed up, those first dozen verses of Matthew 28, and they have this exchange with the angel body. Jesus is not here. He's going on. He's alive, and go tell the men. So the women preached the first sermon and telling Jesus is alive. Jesus is risen. But there's a phrase as they are departing the tomb site. It says, and they departed quickly with fear and great joy. Mm. And that struck me this time. So, Reverend Green, if I were focusing on a sermon text, I would talk about with fear and great joy. Wow. We enter this season, we remember Dr. King's passing, we reflect on all of the funerals that will come out of this COVID-19, and particularly what is unfolding now in New Jersey, New York City. It's just unimaginable the kind of grief and sorrow we have to prepare for, the fear of the unknown. What will this disease, will it return in the fall? Mm. And so it is with fear and great joy, because we know that ultimately this universe is in the hands of a great and loving God.